What are you doing, Willis? You're always in these videos.
Hey folks, I hope everybody's doing well. Today we're going to be talking about the lovely Rolex Daytona 116520 all steel pre-ceramic white dial watch. More specifically, I'm going to run you through my experience buying this watch, a quick overview of the history of modern Daytonas, alternatives I considered to this watch, how the watch actually works, and then just some pros and cons on aesthetics and things that I like about it. Now, getting a bit into the purchase experience, I mentioned that I bought this from Rolex Certified Pre-Owned, and that was for a price of $23,900. I did overpay probably by $2,000 relative to the gray market, but I went through the certified pre-owned process for two reasons. Firstly, just having that peace of mind, knowing everything's 100% authentic, that there's a warranty associated with this, and if anything were to go wrong, I could just bring it to Rolex and everything would get serviced. And then the second piece is availability. It was really nice just being able to go in, buy the watch, and walk out with it effectively. So trying the Daytona on my wrist today is the Datejust 36mm Smooth Oyster, which has been my trusty companion for about 3 years now. But let's throw on the Daytona. We do have two buckles, so we have this first one and then a second one here to get the watch on. And I'm a really big fan of both this, the bracelet on the 116520, which is the modern production bracelet, and I'll elaborate more on that, as well as how the watch fits on my relatively small wrist. Even though it's a 40mm watch, I think it actually measures something like 38.1 in terms of diameter, which makes it a really good watch for both guys with small wrists, but I think it'll fit perfectly for most wrists. Overall, great size, really happy with the wrist presence and how it all fits. In terms of the occasion I got this for, so this was for my 30th birthday. Ever since I had gotten this Datejust about 3 years ago, I had been saving up in anticipation of the 30th birthday, knowing that I wanted to buy a special piece. The Daytona is something that I always thought was a very elevated watch. I like the steel in particular, the pre-ceramic, as I don't know, they look great in person. I like the way the steel bezel looks. I think that it's more of a classic piece. And call me crazy, but I sort of like the fact that you can actually scratch the bezel a little bit. In 20 years, it'll show some sign of wear and some sign of history versus the ceramic Daytona, which will always look pristine and always look fresh, which is great too. But the steel bezel was definitely a draw for me on this one. And then two other things that drew me to this Daytona in particular. Firstly, the white dial. I already did have this black dial Datejust, so it just felt a little bit repetitive to get another black dial sports watch, even though I really love the way the black dial steel Daytonas look. On top of that, most Rolex sports models do come with a black dial, so for the sake of versatility and just having something that complements the collection a little bit better, a white dial made a ton of sense. And then the second thing is the size of the watch. So I already mentioned this, but the Daytona is marketed as a 40mm watch, even though the diameter is closer to 38mm. For reference, my Datejust on the right here is 36mm, and you can tell that, they don't really look that far apart in terms of size. For somebody who has smaller wrists like myself, I think that just makes the Daytona wear so well, whereas something like a 41mm Submariner, it's not too big, but it starts to get on the edge of a little bit too large on the wrist. So the sizing is absolutely perfect on the Daytona, and that's something that is specific to the Daytona relative to other Rolex sports models. Just for a super quick history of the Daytona, this again is the 116520. It was in production from 2000 to 2016, this being a 2005 reference. And what makes this watch special is this is Rolex's first in-house movement in a Daytona. Before this was the 16520 Zenith Daytona. As the name might indicate, it had a Zenith movement inside of a Rolex watch. And there were some cosmetic differences too, where the subdials were black and they would have also been centered at the 3 and 9 hour markers, versus on this watch, you can see that they're kind of offset a little bit, getting a little bit closer to the 2 and 10. Then in 2016, this model was replaced with the 116500 LN, which is more commonly known as the Ceramic Daytona, having iconic models such as the Panda. The biggest difference in the 116500 LN versus this is obviously the bezel having a ceramic insert versus this being steel. The ceramic won't scratch, it won't break. You can wear it for forever and it won't show very much sign of wear. But in terms of the movement, at least for the initial replacement of this watch in 2016, the movement largely stayed the same between this and then the ceramic that followed it. When I was debating what watch to get for my 30th birthday, the Daytona is kind of where my heart was. I knew I wanted something a little bit more special, something at the higher end of Rolex's sports watches. And I was actually between all three models of the Daytona, the Zenith, this steel Daytona, and then the ceramic Daytona as well. In terms of why I didn't get the Zenith Daytona, the Zenith Daytona does have a little bit of an older bracelet. It was in production from 1988 to 2000, and you kind of feel it in the bracelet a little bit. It's not the sturdiest. I swear I could feel it wiggle on the wrist, but that might have just been in my head. But this is a watch that I plan to wear a couple days a week. So having a not that sturdy bracelet is something that would have totally driven me crazy. And the tougher competition was between this watch and then the ceramic Daytona. In particular, I was considering getting the black dial ceramic Daytona, which if you'd asked me a year ago which one I was going to end up with between that and this, I would have totally bet the black ceramic. I think over videos and photos, the ceramic Daytona is like amazing. I mean, over photos and videos, they might actually look better than this watch, if you were to ask me. But in person, I think the steel Daytonas come off way better, way different, and just fantastic. Something about the steel looks both really polished, reflects the light beautifully, but also looks a little bit tough at the same time. I don't know, it feels like a real sturdy watch. And having the opportunity to look at this and the ceramic in person, side by side, and actually do that a couple times was enough to sell me on this version of the Daytona. So that's all to say that if you're considering or debating between Daytona models or just any big watch purchase overall, I would really push you to go in person and check it out, because how they look, how they wear, everything is going to be different in person. And you want to make sure that you're ending up with the right watch, which you're not going to be able to do just through photos and videos on the internet. And this model, the 2000 to 2016 reference here, it feels like a bit more of a collector's piece and something that's just a little bit more rare. I don't think I've ever seen one of these in the wild, so it does just feel special having that watch, and it feels like a bit more of a deliberate choice than maybe a ceramic Daytona. In terms of how the watch actually works, and in particular the chronograph function, to start the chronograph, you press this top right pusher, and that will get the arrow going. The arrow hand here being the start of the chronograph function. It is not the seconds hand. The seconds hand is actually this 6 o'clock sub-dial right below the Daytona text, and that's what's always going. In order to pause the chronograph function, you press the top right one more time, and then to reset, you press the bottom right, and you see the chronograph seconds hand snaps right back into place, whereas the actual main seconds hand under the Daytona text is continuing to run. Then what the other subdials do is the 3 o'clock subdial, so this one off to the right, will tell you how many minutes have elapsed since you started the chronograph function. That goes up to 30 minutes. And then on the left, you have an hour subdial. So that'll tell you how many hours have elapsed since you've started the chronograph function, up to 12 hours. The last few things I'll say about the chronograph function is, one, I do find myself actually timing a bunch of stuff now. So whether it's putting food in the oven or going on a walk and seeing how long it takes to get somewhere, or just ordering food at a restaurant and measuring how much time it takes for the food to come out. I do find myself, whenever I'm wearing this watch, using the chronograph function quite a bit, which I think is really cool to like actually use the practical application of the watch that was made so elaborately for this purpose. With that said, I also find myself fidgeting with the chronograph function quite a bit. It's a pretty satisfying feeling just pressing the pushers here and also seeing the chronograph seconds hand snap back into place. So there is definitely a little bit of fidgeting that's been going on. And the last thing is, given the actual seconds hand is on the 6 o'clock subdial here, I do often find myself just leaving the chronograph function running when I'm wearing the watch. I just think it looks really cool seeing that arrow tick by, and something's really satisfying about having that nice sweeping motion going on in the background at all times when you're wearing the watch. And the last thing that I love about the steel Daytona is that it can actually scratch. It can actually age, which is something you can't necessarily say for ceramic watches. But for me, that's a draw that 20 years from now, 30 years from now, it will look like it's been worn. It will look like it's lived a life with me. And I'm excited to hopefully make that video in 20 years when I do a 20-year owner's review of this watch. I'm sure that it's going to look even better than it does today. And I hope you can dial in for that one. But until then, thank you for checking this video out. Feel free to drop any comments or questions about this watch, and appreciate your time. We'll talk soon.